Welcome back to Pumped On Properties monthly property market update. Now today's a really exciting one because over the month of May we saw every single capital city increase in value for the first time since we started recording these videos. So there is some exciting information to unpack in today's monthly market update. So let's get into it.
Now, if we look at the monthly capital growth rates across Australia's capital cities, Darwin, Australia's most undervalued market at the moment, is absolutely smashing it, going up over 1.6% in the last month. Now, I'd like to say this had more to do with market fundamentals than speculation, but I know this market is getting blown up at the moment because buyers agents from all around Australia are smashing that market at the moment and driving prices up.
Now we saw every other capital city increase in value as well, going up by somewhere between 0.4 and 0.7%. So every single capital city having a great month over May.
Now, when we look at the average annual capital growth rates across the country in the last 12 months, Brisbane, Perth and Adelaide have still been the clear winners, with Darwin slowly creeping up in the background. Now, what's interesting when we compare the data today versus 12 months ago is those average annual capital growth rates have come down dramatically. In fact, 12 months ago from today, Brisbane, Adelaide and Perth were all up between 15 to 20% year on year. Now, what I think we're feeling the effect of is what the RBA and the Reserve Bank of Australia were trying to do a couple of years ago when they started to increase those interest rates and sort of slow down the economy. Now, those interest rate rises have had a delayed or a dragged effect on the economy, which has had the effect of slowing down property prices across the nation and getting rid of some of that speculation in the Australian property market that we saw in a post-COVID world.
Now, as we change gears and have a look into the vacancy rates, we're starting to feel like a broken record here with chronically low vacancy rates across the board. Now, every single capital city has recorded a vacancy rate below 2%. In fact, Melbourne had the highest vacancy rate at just 1.8%. So there is a severe undersupply of rental properties across Australia at the moment, which is great news for investors, but not so much for those tenants out there that are having to pay higher weekly rents at the moment because of these chronically low vacancy rates.
Now, I think the vacancy rate issue across the country has been the result of two things: massive immigration or population growth across the country, as well as a significant jump in the cost of construction across the country, which has resulted in a lot of people that would have gone out there and built to buy established or existing dwellings instead. Now, I was reading an article from Phil Anderson, who wrote The Secret Life of Real Estate and Banking last night. And Phil was saying, despite there being a significant undersupply of available dwellings for rent in the country right now, there's actually a shadow market of rental listings, which we'll begin to see as the water begins to drain out when we move through the GFC 2.0. Now, these listings that aren't being caught by the likes of SQM or CoreLogic at the moment are the holiday homes across the country, the Airbnbs across the country, as well as all of the vacant apartments throughout Australia's capital cities. Now, according to Phil, when the next financial crisis comes through, many of these dwellings will come back to market at the same time, and those vacancy rates around the country will surge up.
Now, over the month of May, it was a little bit of a roller coaster ride for auction clearance rates because there was so many different external factors that had an influence on those clearance rates, because we had the federal election, we had some public holidays, we had the interest rate reduction as well. So it was a huge month for the property market. Now, auction clearance rates have been fluctuating throughout most capital cities outside of Melbourne, where according to CoreLogic, they recorded their 6th week in a row with the auction clearance rate above 70%. Now, we've been feeling this at the moment as buyers agents helping people enter into the Melbourne property market. We're seeing a lot of competition at those auctions down in Melbourne and a lot of registered bidders coming and a lot of properties selling slightly above the expectations. So it is really starting to heat up down there, and that's a clear indication on those auction clearance rates remaining so high.
Now, in terms of consumer confidence, according to ANZ's Roy Morgan report over the last month, we've seen that rise slightly to about 92 points. Now, when we look at the longer term trend in terms of how we feel about the Australian economy and the property market over the period between 1973 to 2024, the ANZ Roy Morgan report averaged around about 107.9 points. So the way that we're feeling right now is still very, very pessimistic about the market, which is a result of the increase in construction prices, all of the people coming in from overseas, the higher interest rates, the job insecurity that many Australians have been facing, and the extremely high cost of living in Australia at the moment. Now, what I believe will happen over the next 12 months as the RBA continues to reduce that interest rate lower and lower, and we get rates at the retail level back to about that 5 to 5.5% mark, is that confidence will continue to improve and more investors and first home buyers will come back into the property market.
The unemployment rate remained at 4.1% throughout the month of May, which is still sitting significantly below the longer term averages, which is great to see that there's still plenty of jobs available. Now, if we have a look at who's buying the properties around Australia at the moment, the lending rates are indicating that about 63% of property purchases are being made by owner occupiers at the moment, with 37% going to investors. Now, we know the longer term averages, generally we see somewhere between 65 and 70% owner occupied purchases and around 30 to 35% investment property purchases. So a slight leaning towards the investment market at the moment. And this could be a reason for significantly higher property prices in particular markets around the country where a lot of people may have preferred to buy their own home, but they may not be able to afford to purchase that right now. So they're choosing the next best alternative, which is to go out there and secure an investment property to get their foot in the door.
Now, in terms of interest rates over the last month, we are seeing things on the declining or the easing phase of the interest rate cycle at the moment, which is music to my ears. I think personally over the last 3 years, by not fixing some of those cheaper rates, the good old days of the 2 and 3% mark that you sort of got for a long time, has probably personally cost me somewhere between $200,000 and $300,000 of extra interest over the last few years. So for me, I'm loving this respite. I'm excited to see them continue to come down later in the year, with the most likely scenario, according to CBA Bank, as well as all of the other majors in Australia, being rates coming down at the next board meeting again.
Now, despite what some people will have you believe, there is plenty of supply available on the market at the moment. The total number of listings around Australia throughout the month of May sat around the 256,000 properties available to be purchased. Now, that was a 5.9% increase from April to May. So we are seeing those listing numbers increase, which is great, but there's still plenty of properties available out there. Now, while it's always good to look at the total number of listings, I think a more important indicator is the number of distressed listings that are selling at the moment. So we saw a month-on-month decline in the distressed listings across Australia and a significant decrease year on year. In fact, distressed listings are down by over 9% year on year. Even though people have been feeling the higher interest rates for quite a long time, we are not seeing an impact on those distressed listings.
Now, before we jump into this month's gold nugget, as well as the positive news at the moment, I was deep down the wormhole last night, which is something that happens to me about once every 6 months. I just feel like I need to catch up on everything that's going down. And I went to a lot of Phil Anderson's work over the last 12 months. Now, what he was saying is that at this stage of the cycle, we'll begin to see a divergence in what he calls the real economy versus the artificial or the inflated economy. Now, the real economy is businesses that are producing goods and services that are in things like food, accommodation, housing, transport, and that serve people and the economy as a whole. Now, the artificial economy is more things that are speculative, like the AI technology and some of the stocks at the moment, as well as the cryptocurrencies or the meme-related cards out there in the market at the moment. Now, what Phil was saying at this stage of the cycle, which he calls the winner's curse phase, is that the real economy's news will continue to get worse and worse over the next couple of years. But because of the speculation in the artificial economy, the gap will continue to widen. Our attention will go this way, where the real economy is slowly going into a period of decline, and will end up in what he calls the GFC 2.0. Now, what is important to look out for at this stage of the real estate cycle is what's going on in the true media. Now, the way that you can do this is keep a finger on the pulse, like we do every single month, about what's happening in the Australian property market, what's happening with some of the leading indicator stocks, and for those more sophisticated investors out there, what's happening in the US in terms of building approvals, the yield curve, and the American dollar versus bonds over time, so that you can keep a finger on the pulse and notice the split in the market before most other Australians do. Now, what he says that begins to occur at this stage of the cycle, the mania or the winner's curse phase, is that certain things will break out, have a phenomenal run, and people will feel like it's never going to stop, and the media will get more and more and more sensationalized and focused on what different celebrities are doing around the world or what different leaders around the world are doing. And a great example of this has been in the last week or so, the breakout between Donald Trump and Elon Musk, which has sort of caught all of our attention, and these things will continue to happen more and more and more. And most people's attention will go that way, along with the AI stocks and the Bitcoin, while the real economy sort of starts breaking down behind the scenes. Now, why we're bringing this to you so early at the moment is like we did before the mid-cycle slowdown, where in 2018 we started to say, start looking out for 2021, which is the mid-cycle slowdown, and that's a repeat event that we've seen 13 previous times over the course of the last couple of hundred years in Australia, the UK, and America. Now, at this stage of the cycle, understanding this information is so important so that you can protect yourself, you can get yourself in a strong position, and you can not go out there and buy the speculative, overvalued assets, but you can pick apart the Australian property markets like we are and pick up the most undervalued suburbs in the likes of Brisbane and the likes of Melbourne, where there is true value still in the property market right now. Now, for those of you interested in learning more about this sort of stuff, I just recorded a video called the 18.6 year real estate cycle explained, which you can jump on YouTube or our podcast and take a look so that you can understand history, and hopefully you can use that history to make incredible decisions to set yourself and your family up over the next 5 years, which is going to be a once in a lifetime buying opportunity.
Now that was a bit intense, but let's talk about the history, right? Because over the last 30 years, we have seen two full real estate cycles unfold. And what blew my mind was when we stumbled across an article from CoreLogic that looked at property values from 1992 all the way through to 2022. And what that article indicated was that house prices, detached houses in major metro markets around the country, went up 453%. So there is incredible buying opportunity if you are a long-term investor that wants to hold through multiple real estate cycles. And the interesting thing is, when Simon Priestley analysed over 50 years worth of Australian property data, he brought to our attention the fact that there's only been 1 year out of the last 50 where every single capital city decreased in value at the same time. So we've got to remember that the Australian property market isn't one big property market. There is cycles within the Australian property market, and there are certain capital cities that represent more value than others. So when you know how to analyze the history, when you know how to look at what looks attractive and undervalued at the moment, what's got good population growth expectations, what's got good infrastructure growth expectations, what has a nice diverse economy and low unemployment rates, are the markets that we're most interested in. So although we're coming into an interesting time in history, we will likely look back at this time in history as a great opportunity. I still love to look back at the history to realize that the Australian property market has always done really well over the long run.
G'day guys, my name's Ben and I'm the director here at Pumped on Property, and I just want to say a massive thank you for watching our content today. Now, if you're thinking about buying an investment property in the next 3 to 12 months, then the team and I would love to offer you a one-on-one strategy session. In that session, we can talk about exactly where you are right now, where you'd like to be longer term, and we can deeply educate you on the Australian market. And then you can take that information and go and absolutely smash it on your own, or potentially become one of the small number of clients that we work with each week. To book your session, all you have to do is go to www.pumpedonproperty.com and click that book your free strategy session button. But either way, we wish you all the best on your journey as an investor to financial freedom.